Upcoming advanced mode. Okay, we should not worry about that. Operations to customization. Now it is live. Okay. Morena, do not join this meet because there is some noise at your end.
Tell me.
Do not join this meet because it is being publicly broadcasted and there is some noise at your end. And I do not want to speak through this message. I will be speaking to you via what is called WhatsApp chat. Okay. Because even I cannot speak. Are we live? Please check once. Queue unavailable. Go home. Video queue unavailable.
I can see the presentation here.
On the screen. And are you able to hear what we are saying?
Yes, I can.
Okay, now are we live? Please check once. Just after do not speak. Just chat with me via WhatsApp. Okay.
So I'm basically going to YouTube Live, right?
You just have to
Okay.
check the YouTube live and Instagram as well. Keep sending snaps
I
of
can see the presentation here.
nice
Okay.
on the screen. And are you able to hear what we are saying?
Oh God. Okay, I'm leaving.
Yeah. There is some noise at your end. That's why. Anyway, Melissa.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, so this is how it will be seen. I hope you'll be able to, converse like this. I don't think you would be visible on the screen. Don't worry about that.
Okay.
You must have seen the screen, right?
I can see it.
No. You must have gone through the screen already, right?
Yes.
Nice. So let us wait for 10:30 and you will start at once. I have to pause my WhatsApp here. I have to make sure there is no noise.
Should I close WhatsApp?
I don't think there would be too many chats at your end.
Okay.
View slide mount. No. View reading view. Let me confirm this once. We are already live. Everything is going live or whatever we talk right now.
Okay.
Why is it showing that the has been removed? I guess you have to close your WhatsApp. No, this is
Close it?
yeah. Or mute.
Okay.
Mute.
Okay, I closed it.
Nice. Anyway. So, welcome Melissa Mulvihill.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
I am Nachi Keta. I am from Shabdavek, and I can say that I am very happy and rather proud to have been part of the publishing process of your fantastic book called Something You Don't Know Yet.
This has been very exciting.
So, this is all for the audience. This book, Something You Don't Know Yet, is basically a memoir of Melissa Mulvihill as she tries to bring up her kid who suffers from CVC. Can you explain the disease and what exactly made you write it, or just in short, so that the audience may know what the book contains and what they may expect from this discussion?
Sure. CVS stands for cyclic vomiting syndrome. It is, or was, a contested illness, meaning that it was poorly understood. In fact, many physicians would have told you at the time that my son was born in 2001 that it's not a real thing. Some physicians had never even heard of it, certainly not if the symptoms presented in an infant. It's not something that you would be able to tell from other illnesses very easily. The primary symptoms are debilitating nausea and vomiting, GI disruption that can present different ways. Usually it ends up being called irritable bowel syndrome, even in toddlers or infants. And it's an overwhelming disorder. Research is ongoing, but it's difficult to manage. There's only a handful of medications that can help treat the symptoms. There's no test for it because it's a syndrome. It's not a disease. It's the result of processes that we don't completely understand yet.
Okay, thank you. I guess this is all for the audience, but I would like to begin something that made me choose this book. Because as soon as I got this book in my email, there were two things that attracted me to the book. First, my own experience as someone who can be called as chronically ill. I am a kidney transplant recipient. And two, my mother's, or rather my parents' suffering as I went through my illness. So I could connect somewhere or the other with the pain or with the. It will reconnect in a sec. And it's reconnected.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Pain is always new for the sufferer but loses its originality for those around him. Everyone will get used to it except me. Melissa, this quote, you must have experienced it somewhere or the other. I mean, yeah, your son was going through CVS, but you were also going through something. Please explain what this quote, means to you. And if you can connect with one of your book's quotes, that would be fantastic.
This quote is everything, actually. It sums up exactly what we were going through as parents. And I just want to say that it wasn't me just alone. But in order to write this story, I kind of zoomed in on me and on our son. I spent a good deal of time with him while my husband was about. If you want to understand what's happening with your son, you have to figure out how to have this relationship. Medicine is story, and I was struggling in a huge way to figure out how to tell that story. It was difficult to find the right words for somebody else's pain.
I totally understand, Melissa. I mean, I think this idea of not able to find words in order to relay what you want to say, and of course, even if you have those words, the other one cannot really understand what you are going through, because for them it's basically impasse. Everyone gets ill, everyone gets, everyone dies. But when someone suffers from a kind of chronic pain for the first time, he feels totally alone as anyone can be. And going through your son's pain is actually more than, you know his own pain, in my personal opinion, because you are connected to him in various ways that I don't want to focus on right now. But yes, one of the most important things that comes to folk in literature, or what is called literary books of the kind that are published nowadays, and the answer is a straightforward no. When I look at the literature being published on everyday basis, I find it very hard to you know see any piece of literature, a book, a collection of poems that actually talks about an experience, as Melissa puts it so
I'm
simply.
losing your connection again, Rahul.
I guess it will continue to happen. My OBS software continues to close and open, and at the same time, uh, my system is getting hanged somewhere or the other. So it's completely okay. Yeah, it's okay. Can you hear me, Melissa? Melissa, I guess she got offline. You let her bring. Okay, fine. It's completely okay. Okay. Can you hear me, Melissa? Hi, Melissa.
Hi, you're back.
Yeah, I guess I got disconnected. It's completely okay. It happens. I live in a small village.
Can you hear me, Melissa?
So, continuing, uh, my focus for this short section of this whole talk is to discuss why we do not have why we do not have enough representation of critical illness or in uh, literature. So, in this regard, Virginia Woolf writes an essay called On Being Ill, and this passage struck me even 4 or 5 years ago when I was trying to read more and more stuff on illness. And she says something in the tune of, finally, to hinder the description of illness in literature, there is a.
Hi. Back.
Yeah, I guess I got this. Melissa, can you please no, go YouTube at your end.
Got windows open. I can hear you.
Continuing, my focus for this short section of this whole close YouTube at your end. We do not have, why we do not have enough representation of critical illness or in so in this regard, Virginia Woolf writes an essay called On Being Ill, and this as he says something in the finally to hinder the. Yeah, nice. You have closed YouTube. Fine. So continue.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. You have to, keep your YouTube at your end close so that we can converse. It will
It's
be.
closed.
Yeah.
It's not open.
Thank you. Thank you. So continuing, we have this quote by Virginia Woolf, which basically struck me when I was reading on Being Ill by her. Finally, to hinder the description of illness in literature, there is the poverty of language. English, which can express the thoughts of Hamlet and tragedy of Lear, has no words for the shiver in the headache. It has all grown in one way. The merest schoolgirl, when she falls in love, has Shakespeare or Keats to speak her mind for her. So basically, what Woolf is trying to say is that we have words for almost every experience in the world, but when it comes to describing illness, we don't have enough words. Did you, as you have already mentioned, that you were unable to describe to healthcare professionals what exactly might be wrong with your son, and you went through a series of experiences, as I recall from the reading and narrating of the book, that you suffered a great deal in order to understand what his illness was. But the key point you focused on was that we need to have some kind of knowledge when it comes to medicine, or some kind of empathy from doctors, and this is what I get from your conversations. My question is this: while you were writing in the creative process, did you find any lack of words? Because when I read your narrative, I find it very inspiring. For example, quotes like still stuck with me, like mm, this quote, which is my favorite, which is basically the beginning. It comes near the end of the book, I know that, but I have presented here in the beginning because it somehow uh, succinctly explains the condition of your body. In a matter of seconds, the word is spread: nausea and vomiting. Meaning, now basically, nausea and vomiting is something that your son is going, but you say nausea and vomiting ruining you. I listened to the reading for a long time. The sound of first click, 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 how weeds appear in your digestive system, and you are pulled from IVs of fan and sleepy medicine. The spring world is made green, and you are made by the click, click, click. I sit in a chair with no armrests and wish that I could make it instead. So my question, Melissa, is: do you find, did you find yourself at lack of words in describing what you've already gone through?
You were breaking up a little bit, but I think that I understood what you asked. When I wrote this, that particular section that you're talking about, I was probably at my lowest. I had zero amount of hope. We were stuck in this repetitive sort of cycle. And at the time, my husband and I just kept repeating ourselves over and over, and he's very good at lifting me up. I was frequently the one when Eamon was in the hospital that was interacting with doctors, and we were always hoping that each hospitalization would yield some sort of information that would guide us. It's interesting what you ask about words, though, and I think it's in particular that pain is different, especially when between mothers and, in this case, my son. Pain doesn't really have an object. It's not like any other emotion. It's not an emotion, and it doesn't serve any like purpose other than to make us pay attention to our state. And in describing my son's pain, the risk was always that people would not be able to tell the difference between me and between him. And to be honest with you, at the very beginning, that was really hard for me. It's one of the reasons why I insisted I needed to take care of him at night. There was no way that I could know him if I wasn't able to understand what was my frustration, what was my fatigue, because Eamon was really not well. I mean, there were lots of very kind of difficult things happening that were alarming. And so me being alarmed is a separate thing. I'm alarmed, my husband is alarmed, our son is alarmed, everyone is alarmed. And then the question is, how alarmed should she be? Because I'm the mom. And the question for me, at the time was probably very alarmed, but I'm not the expert. I thought of doctors as experts at that point, not as somebody to have a relationship with to help me help my son. So we spoke in terms that were medical. We used a lot of like data words. And I explained, and it took a long time because people could see that I was exhausted. They could see that, I was emotional because some of it, that's the other thing is when appropriate distress ends up being medicalized, it's really, really hard. So I was trying to make sure I was doing that as well. It wasn't just me. So finding words at the time, they were all of them were medical words. There was rarely a time when I invested in that, I don't think I can do this, or I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. I never did that. I kept that between my husband and me. And even despite that, people were very certain that part of the problem was that maybe I was misinterpreting pain. After all, I mean, my son, he couldn't speak. So, there's just a little bit of doubt, just enough doubt when you're talking with medical professionals that they kind of sometimes latch on to that. It can make a diagnosis take a long time because then, when you're feeling out in a relationship, what you're allowed to say to someone, what I mean by that is what will ruin the relationship. You can very quickly tell where the boundaries are. So you go along, you do what you need to do. The problem for me, and this is something that I learned, and I'm really grateful that I did learn it because I have to apply it to myself all of the time now. And that is, when do I have to speak out louder? When do I have to say, no, I think you're wrong? And in a nice way, in a diplomatic way, in a way that
It's okay.
physician understand. And, pain is really tricky that way. It just resists description. And that is why I think when I was writing this, I tried to remember what it was that we saw Eamon doing, because he was doing a lot of physical things that babies really shouldn't do. And, I'd never had a sick kid before. To me, illness was not part of health at the time. Now I understand that illness and health are not separate, much like death is not separate from life. And the task is to adjust to illness. But at the time, I did not understand that. I wasn't sure he was going to be okay. And so to me, it was an emergency to convey to them what was happening to him. It was a little bit like a roller coaster.
So somewhere or the other, you are emphasizing upon a difference in your perspective from before and after. You say that at that point of time I was not, at that point of time I was. So my question is, and it relates to this sentence by Virginia Woolf. I'll keep coming back to her. Consider how common illness is, how tremendous the spiritual change that it brings. Now, I don't think that the kind of spiritual change that Virginia Woolf is talking about is not applicable to those who live with or who suffer through the pain of other. Because as I understand, pain is not something that is limited to one being, even if it is, yes, physically speaking, it is. But pain, as the mother of a child who is sick, did you go through a kind of spiritual change? You definitely did go through a change of perspective towards the world, a change of perspective towards yourself. That is true. But was it spiritual in some sense?
Um, I guess in hindsight, I would have to say that it is, but I forced some of it. And what I mean by that is that, like, I mean, I think what you're saying is that, I mean, I don't divide the different parts of myself up. So any journey that I was on, um, I was in the middle of basically leaving an organized religion at the time. There was a lot going on with our other son who was older, he was in the middle of being diagnosed with autism. And so for me, I want to take what you're saying about the spiritual part of that. This is how it applies to me. For me, I had to learn how to be part of my kids and how to be separate. Because if I'm completely them, I will be crushed and I will not be okay. Whatever they're going through cannot be exactly the same thing that I'm going through. And it can't be. Partially now I understand because they're going to grow up and have to manage their own health, their own physical and mental health, which, they're not separate at all. And gosh, at the time, I wasn't even sure that Eamon was going to be okay. And so usually you imagine your child's life, whether you're aware of it or not, in all sorts of ways. And really, I think that Eamon was probably at least 2 or 3 years old before I let myself really do that. Was I getting ready for a life to help a child with disability that would never relent? Or were we going to be able to find an answer? And at the time, I didn't even know if there was an answer. So, spirituality doesn't really have an answer. I mean, it doesn't. It's a journey. I think there are lots of
I totally,
pathways
I
to
totally agree.
understand your place here. And I never thought that it would come through illness. When I look back at my life, I never thought that illness would be the thing that would push me to find out about myself, to find out about how it is that I can have a relationship ongoing with not only with our son, but with his physical body. Because it is like having 3 people in a relationship when there's an illness like that. And that's the story. I mean, that is the story that, it's so funny. We're talking about story, but in the book, I mean, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I conveyed was that we never found the answer. For all of our searching, it came to us by accident. And in the book, the little teeny tiny poem that describes that, at first I was like, maybe this should be bigger.
No, no,
Maybe I
no.
should, but it's not. It's very teeny because the answer it just came. And I think that this is much like life. I mean, you have to be ready for these little clues that come along that point you in your right direction. That moment when we found an answer by accident, it didn't negate all of our looking. It just was. It was this significant moment of gratitude. And I think it encouraged me. If we hadn't had that moment, I can't say what would have happened, but we did. And that moment changed our life. My husband and I talk about it all the time, that we accidentally met the doctor that changed our life, simply because I made a fuss over something that was happening to our son in the moment. And she happened to be the doctor that was on duty. And, this may sound trite, but that's life. A long time ago, I stopped looking for answers in like identifiable, like usual places. That's not where I found anything that's ever helped me move forward. There wasn't a lot of organized spirituality in my life at this time. It was me trying to figure out, gosh, how I was going to, I'll be blunt, protect myself from being the victim of a doctor while we
Yes,
also tried to
yes.
get our son well. And by the way, I mean, I'll say this. I was almost a victim a couple of times, but we had to leave the relationship. That's the other thing. Sometimes you have to leave relationships when you're searching in your physical life and in your spiritual life. They're not really different, I don't think. Not separate.
This is something you mentioned. There were few things that I could have pointed out that you said were magnificently put. One of them was basically, yes, you had to find kind of you had to discover or come to terms with the difference in your experience as a person and your children's experience as a person. And uh, and I personally feel, in my definition of spiritualism, or what is called um, actually, this is a very contested word, so let us not go into it. I have completely understood what you mean to say, and I totally agree with you on every point. Now, one more important point is, while reading through your book and while editing it, I felt anger, and I was expecting it, or maybe I thought that there was anger in a few of the words. For example, if you come to it, uh, no, they did not happily. What you should know is that they did not live happily ever after. That's impossible. But they did not learn that to see takes time. Now, you must have explained it in, you have been doing a wonderful job explaining your emotions to us. But what exactly made you write this? Because these lines struck me more than, anything else in your book. Basically, there was a point of time when I would believe that. I actually believe it always. What do you have to say?
You're really insightful right there. That's so funny because that's at the end of this
Yeah.
little story that I made up. So that little story called Salt is about during a time when, and I was angry at the end. You're right about that, actually. But there's also kind of a sort of a when I said to see takes time, I suppose that was me clapping back. We had been struggling. Eamon actually had been doing better. There were lots of periods of him doing better throughout his first 5 years. He was not sick every single day. I think that's important to say.
Yeah, of course.
So, I had been accused. This is not something that I write about very specifically in the book, but because it's very hard, it's probably the black hole of my life, and I don't know that I have enough courage to write about it necessarily. But we had sought an expert's help, and it was a very long and involved process. It involved 4 or 5 visits, and we had launched into another round of testing, a lot of it, and all of it was coming back negative. So we weren't finding any answers. This physician, in the end of this, had accused me of possibly hurting our son. And, this was around eating. Eamon wasn't eating. The food was a problem. He was nauseous all the time. And so that little story, Salt, was about an accidental discovery that I found one day. And it was a turning point for us. Eamon didn't really want to eat solid food. He had had so much trouble swallowing. The nausea itself had interrupted his being, like who he was. It was never separate from him. And I mean, I don't know. I just knew that from watching him. That's not something that it's very easy to explain to a doctor. But as it turns out, that day that I write about in that, Eamon had been fussing around with some Play-Doh and he was eating it. And we discovered that it's the salt that made him put that in his mouth. He willingly put it in his mouth. And I thought, salt, let's try salty food. So when I wrote that, I was just like, it was just for looking. If you can't find something, the next thing to do is not to accuse a person, especially a person who is in charge of the child, the person who is searching, the person who, is doing everything with the child. There was literally no evidence that for what this doctor thought, except that, our son was remaining undiagnosed. His nausea didn't have a source, and it was fairly severe, and it came in cycles. And we had said that this thing comes in cycles. And, we just were not with the right person. The relationship was not right. So when I wrote those last words, that was for her. this physician. I could not write about the experience itself, but that line was for her. To see takes time. And if she was in front of me, I would tell her, you did not see, you missed it. But don't worry, because another doctor cleaned up your mess much later. And so, I'm not completely, because the story is complete, because Eamon was diagnosed, because Eamon was okay, that works out for me. But there are plenty of people out there who never end up with their diagnoses, and it's not okay. And then the relationships end up suffering. My ability to get an answer was going to affect my relationship with Eamon. There's just no getting around it. I mean, and so I felt kind of like maybe resentful that was almost completely jeopardized by this human being. So that little line carries a lot with it. It's very insightful that you got that.
Every line of your book has something more than what the words, tend to symbolize for. Anyway, it made me a bit sentimental because it made me think of an event I have gone, a personal experience of mine. Maybe sometime I would explain it to people, sometime, right? And I want to, talk about this incident because there were moments of intense pain and intense suffering in your life and anger, angst, but there were also moments, and that made the journey a roller coaster. And we find the most perfect strip and the most perfect fossil, and we take them home where everything is safe and mended. And the whole time, how can I tell you, all I think is our baby reclined in a stroller without pain and without vomiting for an entire hour. And the whole time I let myself think of things that might be possible. And I think that I know that you are referring to your partner. So this is an important question. How were you had to deal with, now I'm using a word deal with, I hope you are okay. You had to deal with your son, you had to deal with the doctors, and you had to deal with your husband. So what were their views, and how uh, they helped you, of course, and somewhere or the other you were in charge of your son, because a mother is the first one. That always is the case. But how was your relationship with your husband during this time? Not in the sense of husband wife relationship, but as someone who is there to help you, or who is there to help your son in, and in an experience that is something new but painful.
That's a good question. From the very beginning, my husband has been 1,000,000% in, even when he doesn't know how. Both of us, that would be the case. And because neither of us knew what we were doing. In that particular moment, we had just moved to a new house. I look back on it and I think we were crazy. Eamon was only 3 months old. He was not able to lay down at all. We had to hold him upright. Otherwise, he would choke, turn blue sometimes. He had apnea, but the apnea machines were so unreliable with him that the hospital actually told us, you're going to be a better indicator of when he stops breathing than this machine. And the reason why is because my husband or I were always holding him at night. And you could feel him stop breathing, and all you needed to do was just jostle him a little bit. So the thing to know about my husband is that he's every bit as, I'm going to use the word competitive, but it's not competitive against other people. It's he's a driven, passionate human being. So the second that it became clear that we had a situation on our hands, I mean, for a while there was conflict. We couldn't define it, and it takes a while for everybody to get their footing. But by the time we had moved to that house, and our other son was 5 years old, and Eamon was, 3 or 4, 5 months old when I wrote that, maybe 6 months old. We were functioning as a team. I know that sounds so weird, and people use that word all the time. But you know what's interesting? We had no time. Like, it's funny that I can say that because, there was zero time for us as husband and wife, and we were adjusting to that. And looking back on that, I don't even know how we would have done things any differently. The demands taking care of our family were so significant. I think that I'm not sure what I would do if I couldn't talk like this to my husband. This conversation we're having, I've had millions of conversations with him just like this. He has, I think, really he picked us up over and over again, as specifically me, and we always joke because there's this saying, "Aren't you even going to lobby for yourself?" Dennis is a lobbyer. He's an attorney and he's a great debater, and you'll always find him lobbying or asking a question, making a case, or asking someone, "Are you sure that's your answer? Is that your final answer? Is that even the right thing?" And, this way of being is really separate from me. It's not something I grew up being able to do. I would never have lobbied for myself in most situations in my life. Until we had kids, I mostly was like, well, there are people in charge and they know what they're doing. And so everything will be fine because people know what they're doing. This was just not the case very quickly when, our kids were born, especially our second son, Eamon. And this was all really, really new for me. There were times when I'd come back from a doctor's appointment and we'd break it down, focus group it. I don't think that I knew that's what we were doing. I totally didn't. I'll tell you, we're still heavily involved with several chronic illnesses in our family. And now we do that. I mean, that's the only way to understand how to move forward in these medical relationships, is to treat them like that. And I think that he rubbed off on me quite a bit. I am not nearly as good at lobbying for myself, or simply just asking a question. Are you sure? That doesn't seem right to me. And also I'm a woman and he's a guy. Different dynamics there. Dennis started going to appointments with me regarding my own health care because my own health has been rough. And I think through that process, it has brought us closer together. He firsthand has seen how different women in particular are treated. I mean, even if they're lobbying for children, women are the relationship is different. That's kind of a long answer, but he was amazing. We were struggling with having zero time, working a lot, and there was never a moment when we weren't kind of sort of on exactly the same page with where we needed to go with him. And if I didn't know, there's nothing better than being able to say to your partner, I don't know what to do.
It's okay.
And, he would be there. I never felt lost because I knew that I would be, lost with him. And that's not really lost. When you're with somebody that knows you and understands you, you're not lost ever. So I really didn't feel abandoned or lost. I just felt vulnerable. I felt uncertain. I felt like I don't know if we can do this. Is this going to be the one thing we can't do in our life? Can I really not find the answer for our kid? But I never felt alone in it because of him.
Anyway, these things make me think a lot. Anyway,
They're
continuing.
heavy.
Yeah. I am actually enjoying this discussion more than I thought. So, words are just, sorry, let me have a pause. Words are just linked chains of love, measured for staying or for leaving, really, because that's all there is. Now, this is for the audience. The book we are talking about, something you don't know yet, has, as Virginia Woolf says in one of her quotes, in illness words seem to possess a mystic quality. And I found this kind of mysticism in the words of Melissa Mulvihill. Now, mysticism is not something, Melissa, that Americans think of Indians. No, I am using mysticism in a very, very different way, in a very, very, Englishman way. Going ahead, there are two aspects to this book. One is, of course, as Melissa has been, saying out loud, that she was judged for being the mother of a child with CVS. She was once accused that, there is some feeding issue at the son's end. So she was even accused, and doctors were not listening to her. And this is a recurrent problem in our healthcare sector. The doctors, as I know them, they may be good-hearted, they may be very good people, but their training, in my opinion, is very, very objective. they are treated, they are, trained to be very, very objective in their observations, and that's important to a certain extent. But doctors should not just look at numbers. They should not just look at, yeah, this is the weight, this is height, this is creatinine level, this is the hemoglobin level, and things like that. They should be able to understand the emotions a person is going through. The emotions, if that person is minor and they cannot express themselves, emotion their mother is going through. And if the patient is saying I'm going through something, or if her mother is saying I'm going through something, they have to pay attention to them, not just give use some words like psychology and all these words, because at that point of time these objective criterion of defining uh, illnesses fails. And this is something I hope would be taught in healthcare system as soon as possible, because there is something called phenomenological aspect of healthcare, but I don't want to go into them. I want to come back to the book. Melissa, what made you write this? Because this quote also, attracted me a lot, and I wanted to ask you even while editing it, and I thought of had an idea. I just want to have a more nuanced, and you can go as long as you want. We are taught not to hang out of windows, especially at night, unless we mean it. We are taught not to hang out of windows. What do you mean by hang out of windows, especially at night, unless we mean it? Long live the darkness. There is, of course, some sarcasm in these words, as far as I understand.
Yeah. That poem is about the very beginning, before Eamon was only just days to maybe a month or two old. We had the diagnosis of severe reflux and gastroparesis, which is delayed gastric emptying. So that means that it was very hard to feed him, to get nutrition in him. Beyond that, Eamon's the acid level in his stomach was really bad. He was he was not a happy child. He was in pain. He was a
Yeah,
baby that
continue
was
on.
very difficult to comfort, and nighttime was really difficult. So we knew that Eamon could not lay down. And go try to tell a doctor that your child can't recline, because they start making noises in their throat, then they start choking, then they start crying. They're, babies, if it was a 5-year-old, they could say, I don't feel well, I'm starting to not, whatever, I'm dizzy, I feel like I'm going to throw up. Babies just cry, and doctors like to call that colic. This was not colic. I mean, yes, he was colicky, but we had several conditions on board. Nighttime was very difficult. Dennis and I took turns with Eamon, and that is why the word night is in there. I would hold Eamon against my chest from about 11 p.m. until, sometime in the morning. He needed to take medication around the clock. Oh gosh. So, it's tiring. This is not something that we had a discussion about and said, gosh, maybe we should talk to people to see what they do in this situation. It was just clear, like there's no other thing to do. He can't lay down. We all have to rest. This is the best way that we can do it. But, it also makes you look tired. It makes you not be able to take care of your, other child very well. It means your husband is coming straight home from work, barely eating something, taking over for a little bit so that you can go sleep for 3 hours and then relieve him at 11 p.m. at night. You start to realize that it's not very sustainable. And I think my husband and I both felt like, how long will we have to do this? And so then you start to look for solutions. And, the solution that was bantered around was maybe we should hire a night nurse. And yes. I'll tell you right from the very beginning, I could not entirely verbalize it, but my answer was no over my dead body. And the reason why, it wasn't because I thought that I was, the best. It's because someone needed to be with him 24 hours. There was no way I could tell a doctor what data they needed to know, what symptoms they needed to know about, if I was not with Eamon during his most difficult time. No way. And beyond that, I'll tell you this, me, the person connected to him, The person who would do anything for him found him ridiculously hard to care for. No way was I turning him over to somebody that was going to get paid an hourly wage. I did not trust them. That is how hard Eamon was to care for in the night. He was not an okay baby. And so I was kind of, when I wrote this, that was a challenge. I mean, go ahead, do this again and see what happens. You know, I really felt that as I was writing this, I was like overwhelmed with this. It's not anger. It was just, what do you think I was going to do? And as it turns out, it was the right thing. Sometimes the right thing is hard for parents. Sometimes it makes them tired. It makes them irritable, but it was the right thing. And so that's what I meant by hanging out of windows at night. I'll hang wherever I want to. I'm capable of making those decisions. I will do this. I'm in charge of this. And if I can't do it anymore, I will tell you. But for right now, I'm doing this. And then the long live the darkness is go. I mean, like I just said previously, I mean, I just felt this welling up of, it's a challenge. Don't take me away from the thing that I need to do. Don't take me away from this thing because you think I'm tired. That's temporary. That's a temporary state. But this, you know, what was going on with our son, that was the most important thing. I think up to that point also in my life, if something was hard, I problem solved it. You know, that's what I did. There must be a way to do it. I mean, now I kind of look at things differently. My health is much more of a challenge. And I tend to say, is this hard because I'm not trying hard enough? Or is this hard because this is how I am? You know, I don't feel well because I'm sick versus I don't feel well. Maybe I'm not doing what I need to be doing. And with Eamon during that time, of course I felt awful. Of course I was tired. I mean, duh, that was what was going to happen. I felt really angry when I wrote that. I just wanted to convey like this passionate sense of, I'll stay here as long as I need to stay here. You go do what you need to do. I've got this. I'm here. And by that, I mean, including my husband in that as well. I mean, there's no way I could have done that without him.
Yes, I totally understand. This is for the audience. I really recommend you this book. It's a very short book. Maybe you may not take more than 1 hour, but the words imprinted in this book are going to stick to you. Anyway, continuing. There is a book called When Breath Becomes Air. I think I mentioned it to you in one of our discussions. It is written by Paul Kalanithi, and he was someone who was a neurosurgeon. So neurosurgeon getting ill and writing about a book. And while I was reading it, I felt a kind of shift in his perspective from that crude objectification that doctors are trained for to someone who really understands his or their patient's illness. Because Paul Kalanithi continued, it's a real life story like yours, he continued, treating on people even after he got diagnosed with cancer. So he writes, I don't believe in the wisdom of children nor in the wisdom of the old. There is a moment, a cusp, when the sum of gathered experience is burned down by the details of living. We are never so wise as when we live in the moment. So we are just at the leg end of our discussion. I want to comment on these lines, and we might even comment on this line as well. We shall rise insensibly and reach the tops of the everlasting hills where the winds are cool and the sight is glorious. I mean, I want to give it a positive outlook. We are going to have another discussion with you, Melissa. I think Monorina and one more person will join you in this discussion. So there are a few aspects of you being a mother of a sick child. That is an important aspect that we need to discuss, and there are a few more pointers I want to bring about. But for this today's meet, which I think is the first official meet of Shabdaveg on YouTube, and after that we are going to launch your print book on Amazon as well. So
That's
I just
exciting.
want to I want you to say some closing words commenting on these lines, and a few words from yourself to the audience or to the medical professionals.
Yeah, in the moment. Isn't that powerful? So, gosh, you've said and I can feel it in your words. I know that you know what I'm talking about when I say that medicine is relationship, and that is not something doctors are very busy learning
Yes.
about the human body, and there is a lot to learn, and ironically, so are we as patients, and that's also legitimate learning. The reason why I'm saying that is because we had so many doctors who weren't ready for us to come with our own hypothesis or theory. I'm not talking about with Eamon necessarily, because we did not know what was wrong with him. But our chronic illness journey has continued, and I found that the reactions are different in that moment when you meet your doctor where they are. I would like physicians to understand that psychological and emotional suffering, and even physical suffering to a certain extent, these are things, alleviating these burdens are things that happen between people in the relationship and inside people's brains. Doctors reach for things like mindfulness, which is an emergent property. Mindfulness is not like prescriptive, and it's certainly not curative. It's not something that you do, it's something that you become
Yes.
over time.
Yes.
And I would like doctors to understand that these relationships fail not because necessarily of their lack of medical expertise, it's because they are not in the moment in the relationship with the person sitting in front of them. They can't tell the difference between resolvable problems and perpetual problems. And when that happens, it feels really bad and they disconnect. I've seen doctors disconnect right in front of me. And sometimes I've missed it as well. And it's only later that you're like, well, I didn't realize that they thought that. I think they have a hard time witnessing pain. And when you can't witness pain, you confuse mental and physical issues. And when you do that, you can't see that patients are hurting. But that doesn't mean they're going to hurt forever, or that hurt is the only identity they can own. And I don't know how you teach that. I mean, that's like a personality thing. It's part of who you are. I'm not saying that your doctor has to be your spiritual, your spiritual other. That's not it at all. It's just that some of the doctors that could have helped us, I think, probably had the medical expertise to do so. They just, I don't mean to oversimplify, but they were misjudging somewhere.
No, it's not oversimplification, Melissa. I think it's a fact. Some doctors, they do not have the expertise to judge. Some doctors, even if they have the expertise to have, they don't take enough interest to really get into the problem. I think I have to get it out of my system. I don't suffer just from I'm not just a kidney transplant recipient. I also suffer from something called OBS, obstructive defecation syndrome. And for a long time, I've been harping on continuously. There is something wrong with me. There is something wrong with me. I went through a series of tests. I picked up my book, my OPD book, and I went to a different doctor. I showed them, and they, tested me. They tested me. I continued harassing them, and at some point of time, my doctor got frustrated with me, and what they were doing. I also went through some invasive procedures. They felt that I had some issue with my urinary system. So at some point of time, I was also frustrated. What is going on? But my doctor, he just wrote. It was an accident. He just wrote it on a paper, and he called the doctor, gastroenteritis. Basically invasive gastroenterology department. And then my problem was revealed. He just checked me and said, yeah, you're suffering from obstructive defecation syndrome. So that's how things are. So I totally get you what you're trying to imply.
And it's very frustrating. This is this course of our life. We're sitting in these offices, trying to be very rational sometimes about it. And it's hard to know, should I be more emotional with this person or should I be rational? I do think, though, and gosh, I'm sorry that you're going through that. I feel like I should say that because oh my gosh, it's so much. It's overwhelming. Any refusal, I suppose I would say this to anyone, but specifically to like mothers who are trying to work with figuring out, what's wrong with my kid? Do I have the right diagnosis? any refusal, no matter the flavor of it, is a red flag that they're not comfortable with the complexity of your disease. And they just don't know that. I mean, they're not, no doctor has ever said to me or my husband, I'm overwhelmed with the complexity of these symptoms. They minimize, they cheerlead, they intellectualize. And by the way, these are things that we do in regular relationships. We do them all of the time. And so we can expect to see them in medical relationships as well. It's just that they're misplaced. I mean, sometimes I wanted to tell doctors, you don't know me well enough to even like, to minimize. You don't even have, let me finish what I'm saying. You don't even have all the data. And I don't have answers. I don't. And there is hope. I mean, we made it through our situation. You are living your life. You continue to push on. You try to get a different doctor. I mean, maybe next time we can talk about the complexities of what that's like to leave a relationship and keep looking, because it takes everything. It takes money. It takes know-how. It's crazy.
Yes. I think we should stop now, and we will continue with our discussion. I think these discussions are important, and we need to bring out these issues. At least someone would hear us and make sure that these things don't happen to other patients. Okay, Melissa, I think I have had
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, do you want to say something?
No, I just want to say thanks for having me, and I hope that people who get the book enjoy it and find something that speaks to them in it. That's what I hope.
I just want to say that this is a must read. I cannot recommend a book enough, and believe me, I don't recommend books just like that.
Thanks for saying that.
Anyway, I think we should stop now.
Okay.
Thank you for being here. Thank you, Melissa, for being here. Thank you, Morina, for helping organize this meet. Morina is the CEO of Shabda Weg. Thank you, Priyanka. Thank you, everyone. Thank you,